All right. So let's go ahead and get started while everybody's still coming in with us. Well, good morning, everybody. Bennett on school. Here in Chicago, but here needs and Nahaniyagi do Adone and Shinigi Kia on in the Shle do Twitichi ni Bashichin bit any dashache Ado is a Thana Dashanella lay Tehili that Nasha Ado Tenahanje the Shagando Ade Kirste Office of Navajo Government Development Banashnish Auto Policy Analyst. So it's good to meet you all and welcome to our Office of Navajo Government Development and the Commission on Navajo Government Development, the kickoff series for the Diné Government Presentation Series. So everybody's still trickling in. So as I said earlier, just let us know where you're coming in from, where you're watching, and for those that are live on the Facebook, let us know where you're coming into. And so we'll go ahead and get started here. So one of the first things we want to acknowledge is just our appreciation to the Office of Navajo Government Development and the Commission on Navajo Government Development. So the office and the commission found it really critical to share information to the public and just be a source or an educational hub where we can learn a little bit about our Diné government from since time immemorial all the way till now and what it looks like into the future. So, as again we said, there we have a commission on Navajo government development, and each of these I are representations from all across the Navajo Nation with the 5 agencies, 3 that come from the executive, legislative, and judicial branch, one from the practitioner of Native Healing Arts, 1 student from Diné College, and a commissioner from the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee. So this is comprising of our commission members that serve on the Commission of Navajo Government Development, and we're appreciative for our chair and vice chair for their leadership and to leading the commission forward into the work that they're doing. So we just want to acknowledge them and the work that they do in and off the reservation and the work that they do for our communities and for our constituents alike. And right now we have an Office of Navajo Government Development. And our executive director is Mr. Harrison Sosi. And he's a really good resource and a knowledge keeper of some of our information of our tribal system and our tribal government, serving as a former attorney general, a deputy attorney general. So his wealth of knowledge helps us as an office understand Navajo government and the development of the understandings of each of our governmental functions. And Damon Clark, who's our policy analyst, he's also with the office, as well as myself, Triston Black, and Wanda, who's our senior office specialist, and Mariah, who's our research assistant. So each of these individuals play a critical role in understanding what is the Navajo Government Reform Project. So the office and the commission both play hand in hand in moving that project forward, as well as people too. People play a critical part of understanding what the Navajo Government Reform Project is and how they can assist others into the future. So the main presentation that we have here today focuses on the traditional governance. And from the Office of Navajo Government Development today on March 13th, and the presenter myself, Triston Black, who I introduced myself and my colleagues and the commission. And we just wanted to welcome you all today. And if you have any information to share, we'll be willing to share that information, but also be as a resource for you too as well. So be sure to check out our website. We have a lot of good information that we're trying to publish out there. And so our website is kind of like our main resource for people to go online, but also using other traditional forms to educate people out there in the community. Now that it's we got some really good snow across some parts of the res, and now that we're gearing up for springtime and summertime, you'll be able to see our office out there in the community coming soon. So one of the first things we would like to discuss is sort of that timeline and the understanding of Nahata Big Echo Be'etkin. What is that road? What was that path looking like for traditional governance? And we all start from the Yindaneb, it's SLA, Nilia, the foundation that was laid before us by the holy people, and for the existence and the emergence of what we've come into today of traditional Diné governance, and then moving on down that road, what does that look like for imposed or what was in contact with Mexican, Spanish, and American contact, and how that imposed system of governance was executed early in our history as a Navajo nation and the government to where now the path looks like for existing Diné governance. So moving forward with that arrow, what does that look like coming to the next few years, the next decades, and for the grandchildren before us? What does the Nahat Apik Ekobeetin look like for the future? So that's where the Navajo Government Reform Project plays a critical role in educating the public, but also having them as a key individuals being a part of that project too. So as we move on down the line, going back to traditional governance, we always refer back to worlds or lands that we've had in our Hanegi, our stories. And one of the first places that lays the foundation is Nechodilhit. Nechodilhit is referring to that the dark land or the dark world or that dark realm where we had Nahatah bin Nachet be Nahazani Bik now that we've had, leadership providing that fundamental understanding of where it existed, where it grew, and that path where it developed. And there was critical spiritual beings that played a role in that Hashejin, the sort of the darkness being that had a source of governance. And a lot of that led to power struggles that existed in Nicotilhil. And then with those struggles, there was destruction. Was sort of that natural element that led us into the next world, Nichodog ish, into the blue world. And here it says, Betlae itle, Icholni be alkejentadesh so now that we're in this next phase of from the dark land to the blue land or the blue world, there was leadership that started to learn from what the past taught them. And there was the development of consensus leadership, of having that one thought and agreement that so they don't lead to power struggles, so they don't lead to disagreements. But there was leadership that was no longer respected in terms of those struggles that they occurred in Nechotilhil. So they really started to establish some moral, some ethics of laying that foundation of what those laws could be. And but again, there was a power struggle that occurred where it led to unstable leadership again. And in that destruction, tin, ice played another critical role in the natural elements where it led to destruction. It led to a repetition of governance struggle. So we move on to the yellow world, yellow land, and we start to understand hashkeje, do hajonja leadership, whether it be the male and female leadership, the strict and the subtle way of leadership goes in terms of governance. But again, the same thing happened where we see a divide, a separation of the genders of male and female. And so there was disagreements again between both sides, and it led to them they had to separate between each other. And so again, there was disharmony. There was a repetition of struggle and governance. So we emerged into the white land or the white world. And Khajine Hanezna, this is where it goes into the emergence and origin of our existence. The birth of White Shale Woman and her process of becoming a young girl into a young woman, Kinasta, that process and even that aspect plays a critical role in governance of becoming a young girl and transitioning into a young woman. And Tkache Khanegi also for the male side, coming from a young boy and emerging, transitioning into a young man. So Astanak Leheyos yet, where we had changing woman going through those changes in herself from Yotkai Astanak Leheshama, referred to her as our mom, Nikema. Ben Bella Ashklai Alya the in the ne what the nil. So this is where we start to see governance for more of a spiritual governance structure of a non-human form, and then the creation of human beings to where that now the in the ne now that as they emerged and they left into the universe, that governance nahat ahigi it was passed down for the creation of Bella Ashklai Alyaki, creation of human beings. So it was passed down to them, but there was responsibility that came with it. There was discipline that was associated with it. And throughout our history as humans, we've always seen that struggle of governance and nahat ahigi. So now that it's been handed down by the D and the Net, there was a transition of leadership from a spiritual form into a human existence form of what we have today and since time immemorial. And it goes back to Nichodet Sens. Nichodet Sens is referring to that glittering world or those sparkles. Now that the and the that the kai they left, they journeyed on into the universe. And one of the teachings that we associate that with is the yindane. Well, yehiki doit ida. There's really no physical form of the holy people, but we have representation of them through our songs, through our dances, through our ceremonies. But there was no physical form as they left. So one of the things that they've always said and referred to so in our prayers, meaning it refers to the Indonesia are referring to I will be visible in the sunrise. So there's offerings given to the holy people, kadadin or nadat sui, the white cornmeal, the yellow cornmeal when you pray, and that was their teaching. Where we'll be, where we're residing, and through those governance we communicate to them. We've offered guidance or an understanding and governance of where it could lead us, where it could take us. So now that the earth, in a sense, through these various worlds, was created and there was destruction and there was emergence of our origin, that was turned over to human existence. Referring to the earth stewards of this earth and the five-finger beings, the creation of us. So now that was turned over to us. So there was responsibilities for humans' existence in terms of governance. So again, now that humans played a role in governance, there was still that continuations of a power struggle of governance and world events throughout human history that cause destruction, that cause imbalance in leadership or governance. So that's sort of the timeline that we've, been on, and through the stories, those teach us of some of the historical accounts of power struggles, of imbalance. So how do we get back onto balance? How do we get back into stability moving forward? And so some of these critical roles play into nahatah, which we refer to generally within leadership. So it really doesn't belong just to one person. It was shared amongst individuals. It was intangible. It was a fragile thing that one person just didn't have ownership of, but it was shared amongst others. So there was equal leadership and it was carried around, it was given to someone, or you had to be able to, in a way, prove or do tests to be able to be given that sort of role from the people. And it wasn't just an individual that would want to go into these positions. It was the people that would see certain characteristics, see certain disciplines that an individual would have, and see if they could carry on that role for Nahata. So we hear a lot of terms of Natani, Nihinantae, and traditional governance goes back to Diné, but we've also had other forms of leaders, not just human, leaders. There was Zifbenantai, mountains that were once leaders, Twopinantai, the waters, the streams, the lakes, they had their own leaders. Eat Nitbenantai, the lightning, Niyolbenantai, there was within the winds, the airs, Hatkal Bebet, Bohodnihi. So there was chanters or chanting that occurred within leadership. The four-legged beings had their own leaders, like the Winesh, for example, or the Shush as four-legged beings, and Josh with the Winesh. Those were leaders that throughout the stories and the teachings, those were once leaders that still exist within traditional governance. And so this is sort of a synopsis, a large picture of from the dark land to the blue land to the yellow land and to the white land. And it goes back to creation of first man and first woman, place of a spiritual being. Again, there was no form of human form. It was still in a spiritual form, a spiritual being. Then that power struggle that we talked about with governance, Ko'egi played a role in that destruction where it caused imbalance and our natural law saw that struggle. So it created a rebirth in a sense where it was something that was destructive, it was something that was destroyed, but the outcome of it was a rebirth into Nihodov Ish. Birds, large insects, and again, these were all animal beings. So no physical form yet, but still in that spiritual form where there was not a physical body present, but that spirit of it existed. And there was a power struggle again for leadership. And Tien, Do, Ni, So, the winds that were existed, those were those natural elements that led to the yellow world. So this is where we see the mountains, the rivers, and the streams that were created and their governance. And there was a repetition of struggle, separation of the gender, separation of the people. Flood occurred, and that led into Nekhatkai. Yofkai Astana Tlehe Benahat, her leadership that existed. And we've referred to ourselves as the creation of the human beings. And this is where another role plays into of the establishment of our kinship. That's another form of governance. And that dwelling establishment became into existence. Then the holy people left. They journeyed into the universe. We can see them early in the morning, throughout the day, till the evening, into the night. That's their existence of where they left into the universe. They left and gave that responsibility to humans to govern. So this is, now that we've had that understanding of the spiritual form of governance, there was that transition, right? They left, and that was given, torch in a sense was given to human beings. And some of the early Diné governance in our research here at the office, not chid is referring to that gesturing, not chid, the body language, the movements that existed. And some of the key information is that cohesive, they bind themselves with Nihizad, Nihi Kea Dahat Inigi, Nahaga, Sin, Sohadizin, Hanet. The language was a common language. The cultural heritage that existed throughout the seasons of these gatherings, and the well-defined territories by the clan groups or in the community, the geological communities that it once existed, they've all come together within these gatherings. And Sin, so the Zin were key elements of understanding Nachid and Hannet, the stories that were passed down from one generation to the next, to where we still continue to tell those stories, especially during the wintertime, with some snow that come all across like today. Those were perfect times when you were inside a dwelling or someplace warm, and Hannet would play a role in teaching or listening to these stories. Nahat leadership. Ihodni, there was a separation of powers of that authority that existed. Again, Nahat wasn't just belonging to one person, it was shared equally amongst each other. Nabik there was critical discussions that were occurring. The Hasdit amongst the groups, there was consensus. Maybe there was disagreements that existed, but amongst that group, there was there was that balance between positive and negative, that hot and cold. But throughout those discussions, throughout those understandings from each other, they build a better common understanding of where each other come from. And the structure of it that we always refer to or have, other people mention is the 12 Hajonja, the 12 peace leaders or peace chiefs. And they were, eloquence, good judgment, and uprightness in terms of Hajonja, those characteristics that were associated with them. Then on the other side, 12 Hashkejanata, more of the what they refer to as the war chiefs or the war leaders, but it really goes back to the strictness, that Hashkej, that firmness and leadership, and that was honor bestowed them upon, whether it be warfare or a raid that occurred. Those tactics, those strategies that they would have in mind, all played a role into Hashkejanata. So, according to some of our research, Nachid was last practiced before Welde. It's estimated between 1859 in Inchinli or around or in near Canyon de Chelly, one of the last practices of Nachid, and accounts from those that witnessed it or were able to hear stories about it. And it was recorded, and there's not a lot of information out there in terms of articles or publication. There's very, very few, and we get glimpses of little puzzles. And when you look at that puzzle overall, you think about Nachid. Adahot ehtole to beda inani is a main factor that plays into the gathering of all the clans that existed and talking to the people. So for early Diné governance. And so Nahat Binantin. So these are some of the teachings that we've associated with early traditional governance that sometimes our Achedo, Amasana, Anelake, if you listen to them and hear their stories, hear their teachings, or from other relatives, you start to pick out some of these teachings that come within Nahat Binantin so they can maintain moral injunction. There's ethics involved. There's disciplines that play a role in it, economic within those gatherings, whether it be for food security, whether it be for protection of the clan unit, all those played into a role, and law and behavior, behas ani, Iggy played a role into the behavior of leadership, different characteristics that you see out of leadership and how it informs a lot of community members. So it goes back to achasodizan, the protection and security for a nahatani. That's one factor of leadership, is putting that shield up in a sense for your security, for your mind, for your well-being, for your family, or even your own understanding. Achasodizan and hojonj, where kadadin was coated on your tongue, on your head, and your offering was given to the holy people for that blessing. Hajo yaltke do najonago yaltke igi. So you have good words, you have good thoughts that comes out of what you speak, and protecting those words of what's being said too. So those were key elements of sort of the protocols when it comes to and it leads into kid. You know, there was a diagnosis, there was analysis that would occur, and to get a better understanding of where certain things were at and where it could go moving forward. Kid questions were being asked, and one of the key aspects is how we listening to others, being able to be open-minded and listen to different perspectives or something that wasn't caught by leadership, but there was a different understanding from a different community or person that brought the discussion more open-ended, and it brought it more to a better understanding. Suzuki's critical thinking, it's one of the key elements in Nahat Abina, and can critically thinking, you know, analyzing, putting things together and putting thought into it, and then developing action, and then developing a reflection. So having respect for the people led others to follow leadership. They respected that form of leadership. So people had a following in a sense, and they trusted individuals. They trusted that form of leadership that they could follow and, you know, be entrusted of having what leadership is exists. Ada ho Now that we've had good thoughts and good thinking, good analysis, the thing that always comes into mind is that future tense. What is good things are going to come ahead of you? You're going to be in good intentions and good health, good thoughts. And those are the same things that a lot of I had in mind for the community, having those good thoughts so it could have good things ahead of the community or for the individual itself. And so this is just a continuation of that strength of the thinking. You know, sometimes in through the stories there was tests, there was distractions that led leadership to go off course. So you had to have that strong thinking to look past those distractions and stay focused on what the goal is or the path should be, so you don't get distracted. So there was being respectful and working with others, and not just others with humans, but working with Nunset, do not glanchi, do the natural elements, do nifche, ado kadadin, zan, working relationships with those others and being respectful of those aspects so they can all work together in a cohesive manner. So there was solutions to preserve or to bring balance into whether it be the universe or stability. So bringing forward solutions that could contribute to the discussion, that could contribute actions that needed to be taken. By the order of sacred origin, always going back to Nahaga Sen Do Zen, that order, those protocols that were set in place for Ani, for example, natural law. What was the order? What was the protocol that existed for things to occur, for things to exist? So being representation represents the existence of all living beings, of all beings itself. And I think this is a critical component that throughout time immemorial, from to now, Nahat Bijne the love of service, the love of what you do as an individual, as a leader, as a community leader, or working, that love that you do for the service, for the community, your grandkids, your children, and so forth. So creating a vision that can be set forth, that can be a goal and objective to reach. And you do it with passion. You do it passionately. So that way you don't get distracted. You don't go off course. These are some of the nahata bina'antin that we've learned throughout our history and learning from the different characteristics of teachings, of stories, and all goes back in line to when you have traditional settings and you listen to a chedo, a masan, khatkhatligi, these different people, different community leaders, different community members, you start to pinpoint and extract some of the teachings that are associated with those stories all the way to where it exists today. And adone or Ehwinzen, how do we seek relation through our kinship systems, being a good relative, so to speak? Hama adone be jidliniki be este. So Navajo people are a matriarchal society through our clan systems. Amagi, Amasana. So through our clans, we've been passed down through our women folk of that understanding and establishing that as the root, in a sense. If you look at it as a cornstalk, a mahto, a masana, a masana sana, and nehecho, our ancestors, through that kinship, through that cornstalk, the roots goes back to adone ehwinzen keyah ben nache be so now that clan groups were based on community, it was different geographical communities that had different clan aspects. And you go back to even the clans itself. It's take, for example, Twitich. There was probably some source of water within the area. Um, Kinyaani, some sort of structure that existed in those areas. So there was based off the land and the features and the characteristics, clans are in relation to those because they have certain similarities, familiar attributes, and features that are in association with one another. Jish Khatkal Ba'ajit so that was Jish was also another form of identification through whether it's clan identity, the family. Jish was passed down from one generation to the next, and it was kept within the family unit, the clan unit. And that was also served as an indicator of Kinya Anu passed down the Jish to the next generation. And so so now that clans were also established as, kinship-based groups, but they also served as political groups in a sense, where certain leaders from that clan probably stood out and they spoke for the community clan group, whether it be at Nachid or different groups. That individual that was had in a way underneath over the clan system would be able to speak, would be able to attend some of those critical discussions that probably occurred. So that clans have a meaningful form of common interests between each other, and they were each given a purpose for their existence. They each had a role, a task, a responsibility that could be contributive to the whole clan system. Those that were probably potters, those that were probably hunters, those that were probably skilled craftsmen, those each clan systems played a role in identifying their clan or their clan unit. And then atlado atsko atlaje so now that they had clan systems living in smaller groups, when you look at it in a larger picture, these were a large society a large social group that occurred within different geographical areas, different aspects of the land, even though they were specific clan groups. When you look at the larger picture, it could be into a society or a social group that existed and they worked well with one another. They were able to help each other out as a community. If ehozen benacha adajirit nahat benacha hof adahui zoh benacha, so that these social groups that existed, then they start to develop leadership. Then they start to develop in the terms of what a nation or a group, a tribe of people would look like. So it all started from the community level, and you start building blocks up, and you start to build a larger picture where it shows the entire clan system and how they all trickle it down into a clan unit, into a society at large. So now that these clans were established, they've again leadership, governance. There was an official leader, official clan leader, so to speak, that was earned and achieved by the people given that role and the responsibility to make decisions, whether it be on behalf of the clan or on behalf of the community. And the people followed it or they respected whatever outcome decision that was for the better interests of the group, really go into the survival too of that clan group and the people. So the next ina alanje na ajdil na ajdil then there was no system of ranking, there was no hierarchy in respect. There was equal distribution shared. There was no one person on top. There was amongst the group that existed cohesive leadership. And alanje asce donat ani eh eh budget inge. They were determined by again kinship or the residents or where they belong, where they come from. And another important role as also, yeah, they also had that authority. They also had that power to speak or being able to contribute to those discussions. And also another individual that had some role in terms of governance. So men on the other side had that responsibility over the residency or had a role in protection and the safety of the family that occurred within the family unit. And so it continues on to Dinek Echeina a Ajetso Ego. So this is where we start to see amongst the group, there was among the people in terms of kinship relations. Well, David, betseide na chid wal yehego na be so Wednesday, before the long walk, the population was divided into localized bands, and each had its own recognized leader or recognized individual. And there was no, they didn't have that power to themselves. There was no coercive powers or authority that existed. Then, well, they became that is ego after the long walk. The communities or the populations that had these localized bands, they were disbanded, they were broken up. Some of them were journeyed on the long walk, and some of them were able to stay or hide out. So a lot of that was disbanded. It faded away, or it faded in a sense where some of it didn't existed after the long walk. But they also had respect for Khatkhali, as some of those guiders, some of those navigators that came back to be respected and as community leaders and help resolve some of those community disputes after the long walk. Nasta anadil de nepe Washington, Bilaganak echo, na il de alange sizen kone sizento il nif alia. So now that there was a political organization of the people as a whole, there was the introduction of 1923 and to now where we've had a modeled off European parliamentary democracy, a governance. European governance played a role into Navajo governance, and rather than going on to traditional governance. So this is where we start to see that influence, the imposed Bilagan Eko Benatin, the teachings or the imposed Western governance come into play within a transition or a shift in what governance existed. So na do na chid walient and be haol de do hol na has on de nas nila longo adalia. So there was a tribal chairman system that it once existed, and it was elected by a reservation vote, a popular vote for the Navajo Nation Council. And we also start to see Ihodnik Donald Ani Igle Yago Hodes Ahodlongo Anadalia. Another introduction where we start to see local representation, Naznile, chapter officials, chapter leadership at the community level were elected in, and they tended to the local community needs of the people. So when you look back at it, a reflection, this Naznila chapter governance that we had today is also a form of what we considered in traditional governance, going back to the community, going back to the local areas, Kea, Do, Adone, the clan systems, all going back to that local level of where we still have those aspects contributed today at the local level, whether it be at the chapter house, the community level, the family level, the clan level. Those are some of the areas where our traditional governance are still a living, breathing thing, a living, breathing entity. And we don't want it to fade away. We don't want it to go away. So it can continue for next generation goes on. And we reference a lot of this coming from not our teaching as human beings, but again, it was given by the Diné and bestowed upon human beings to be responsible of what that governance looked like. Sometime throughout our history, we haven't been responsible. We haven't been ethical. And so how do we correct some of those? How do we able to stabilize leadership within these teachings, these stories, and how do we use the net traditional governance as a model, as a reference of what those different points mean? And so now that we're we're winding down, we also wanted to do a little the net trivia game with you all. So now that we're at the tail end of the presentation, we wanted to give you an opportunity to, just get out of that regular presentation mode and then interact a little bit about the discussion going on here today. So for your responses, if you want to respond, just use the chat box to respond. So we'll be using the chat box this time. So you'll be given different characteristics through our Diné traditional governance, some of the leaders that we've shared or wanted to highlight. And there's a hint. These are not people. So don't think these are past chairmen or past presidents. These are all Diné traditional governance leaders that existed. And so, but the objective is to guess who best matches the characteristics. So you guys ready? So the first one, this individual, this leader had the strength, the power, and he or she was the risk taker, but they were aggressive with their leadership. They were firm, they were confident in their might within their strength. So if we go back to Nahatape Khanegi, our stories and leadership, these are one of the stories they share. And so in the chat box, who do you think this individual is that has that strength, that power? Who's the risk taker? Who do you think's aggressive in their leadership, but they're confident in their strength, their power? Who do you think this individual is? So yeah, again, these are not people, but what beside non-people, what do you think in terms of Diné traditional governance, who these individuals are? Ready? The individual is Shush. Shitsui. Shush is that individual where he had his strength, his power. He was a risk taker. He was aggressive in his leadership, but he was confident in his strength. But he abused that power of Nahata. So they took the power away back from him. Then another individual came in the picture when they had this discussion. This individual says, "Oh, I'm careful. I care, but I also observant in my leadership. I see what's being done. I think things through before I start anything. I put some thought into it before I do any action. But I'm responsive. I'm quick. My leadership's quick. It's swift. But his downside or her downside was they took advantage of other people and their leadership where they, probably took credit for it or they wanted to have their name on the document or whatever. What individual do you think this is that was in their leadership? You guys ready? Nashtui. Nashtui was that individual who was really careful and he was observant of his or her leadership, thought things through, was responsive and quick. But once he took advantage of those people, they decided to take Nahata away from him. So then the next individual says, Shinat Ashin, Shinat Ani, I want to be the leader. Let me have the leadership. This individual looked oh beautiful. He was charismatic. He was independent. He didn't rely on anybody or she didn't rely on anybody, but they had no knowledge of leadership. They didn't know where to go in their leadership. So they had no sense of direction. So it was taken away by Ma'i, the individuals, the people that had these discussions about leadership. They sent Ma'i to go get leadership back. And from then, there was little no progress that existed for a bit. Who do you think this individual is that was charismatic and independent, no knowledge, no direction, but it was taken away from Ma'i? You guys ready? The bobcat. The bobcat. So you look at the bobcat, it looks all nice, everything's all pretty. So when you look at leadership, these are different characteristics that we see today, whether it be today's governance. You look at people, if they dress nice, if they look right, these are early examples of what leaders taught us about different characteristics, different attributes. So if you look at Bobcat, he has a short little tail. And the reason why Ma'i interfered is because he saw Bobcat just laying around. He was sleeping on the rocks, not doing nothing. So he took the leadership back. But when he did that, he cut Bobcat's tail. So when you look at Bobcat today as a short little tail, goes back to that Ma'i interference when he took the leadership back. So then again, they had the discussion. I want to be the leader. Let me be the leader. I'm slick. I can maneuver. I can go through the loopholes. I know how to work the system. I know how to go around it. But he or she had a lot of disagreements with a lot of people, but he had a motive, he had intentions of where he or she wanted to do these things. But a lot of people feared this being. They don't want to touch this leadership. They don't want to bother him. They don't want to bother her. What do you think kind of leadership is an example of this? So you guys ready? This is the Ishso, Ishso, where they had that leadership. Slender, he maneuvered around the things, disagreed with a lot of people, but he was feared. So they took the leadership back away from him. They took that leadership back. And then another individual says, shh, 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 let me do it. I can communicate with all these people. I can work with them, but I just want the title. The title is what I'm after. I want to be called the leader. And but he wanted to create some sort of change. He didn't want to work with what was already established. Let's change something. He was involved, she was involved in all these things in leadership, almost like a micromanager leader, wanted to be involved in all these things, but was his end goal to be rich, to be wealthy in his leadership. Who do you think this individual is? Some of you said it earlier, and it's Ma'i. Ma'i wanted to be that messenger, wanted to be that title seeker, wanted to create change, but he wanted to be involved in all of it and wanted those riches, wanted those wealths in leadership. So they took it back. They took back the leadership. But this leader was real serious. He was disciplined. Yee, when you hear his leadership, yee, you hear that, and a lot of people sit up straight. They don't want to joke around with him. If you would joke around with him, you might get hurt, something might happen. And that's how he controlled his leadership. But he controlled from above, and he rules by distress, by using that at looking at weaknesses and using those to his advantage or her advantage. What kind of leader do you all think this could be? This leader, eat nit, eat nit. The lightning was real serious. He was real disciplined. He didn't want to joke about things. He wasn't. Don't joke around with him or her. This leadership was strict. He controlled or governed from above a lot of these things. But one individual, nobody else could take this leadership away from him. Every time they made the attempt, they would get striked or something would hurt them. There was only one individual that could take the leadership away from the Itnit. And this leader restored governance and brought with him and established what ethics, what morals were about. All these previous leaders, we learned some of their bad characteristics, their bad ethics. So he established it. We won't have these certain aspects in leadership. We had to be persistent in what we're doing, and he was mature about it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't, talk over others. He allowed them to speak, allowed them to listen, and he was mature about it. And he also welcomed change that would occur and welcomed those opportunities to exist. So who do you think this individual took the leadership away from the lightning? There's only one thing that could take it away from the lightning. And most of you said it. Shache, the horned toad. He's our groundedness in restoring traditional Diné governance, where we get that understanding from. And so he's quick on his feet. He was quick. He out smart eating it to get the leadership back from him. So that's why Shache plays a critical role today of the appreciation and that significance of Diné traditional governance that we refer to these beings. So now that we've hit almost the mile marker here, we wanted to end the presentation today on this graphic here, that's sort of a synopsis of the larger picture of Diné traditional governance. Betsesale, from the foundation on up, Behezani, the laws that existed, Keh, Keh being one of them, Ko, Tho, Nilche, Kadidin, these natural elements that sustained, that nourished leadership to exist and grow. Then the establishment of ceremonial law, customary law, natural law, common law, all contribute to today, which Damon will talk about next week. Is one aspect is Diné Behezani, Navajo, fundamental law, those four aspects, recognizing those laws that exist. Ana Nichotish, Nichotish, Nechalso, Nechalkai, Nichotilsons. All of them from the black, the blue, the yellow were spiritual form, then Yothkai Astana Gle, the Nohoka, the Ne, Alya, creation of human beings from the white world into Nichotilsons, where we have today Jithbinant I, Sisna Genetzil, so Jithzil, Dog Aslitzil, the Bensatzil, and Zilnaotitzil, and Zilchoazil, the mountains associated today, Natzilid as that protector, as that nourisher between Neastzan do Yadithil, Bebehazani, natural law between the earth and the sky and to the outer banks of the universe where the D and the Ne left. So all together throughout traditional governance. This is sort of our timeline in a sense, illustration. And our website has this available and it talks a little bit about it, but we're going to have it only open during the winter season. Once the spring solstice comes around, we'll be able to pause it and share these again till the next winter time in accordance with some of the protocols and cultural understandings and respecting those elements. So, Akihe, do Adasha, thank you all for joining the presentation today and hope you all take care of yourself. Join us again next week where Damon, Mr. Clark, will talk about Diné governance from 1923 to the present. So if you have any comments or suggestions or anything, be sure to email us at navajogovdeb@gmail.com. And you can register online on our website. So if you go to our website, our homepage, there's a tab that says upcoming events. If you click on that tab, you can register for the next presentation next Wednesday at 12 noon. Same thing on Zoom and via Facebook Live. So we just want to say thank you all for joining us today. Hope you all take care, travel safe in the snow, and yeah.